This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.
Let me tell you about the time a man proposed to me, sort of, while also making it very clear at the same time that he didn't really care about marriage. So, years ago, I was dating this guy and I thought everything was perfect. I had prayed and prayed to just meet someone who was the male version of me, and he seemed to completely fit that bill, right? He seemed to agree with me on, our interest, on our values. We didn't really argue too much because we thought alike. I, at that time, did not consider myself to be a very romantic person, and I felt like I met a man who understood that. It didn't expect that out of me because he wasn't like that either. It just seemed very comfortable. And then the day came that we had a conversation that changed my life forever. So at that time, although again, I didn't consider myself to be the most romantic person in the world or anything like that, I definitely still wanted to get married. I grew up in a 2-parent home. My parents have been married for 40 years now. I've always just had that value instilled in me that marriage was important, and it was something that I wanted in my life as well. And it didn't help that at this time, I was really getting serious about the fact that I wanted to be married at some point. And meanwhile, of course, I had several friends at that time who were in that phase of life. They were either planning a wedding or they had just gotten married, or I had some friends at that time who at this point were more settled into marriage, 2-3 years in. So this guy, let's call him Derek. So Derek and I were hanging out at one point, and he invites me to come over to his place, and he says he'll cook dinner. So I take him up on that offer. We eat, we have a good time. And then afterwards, I tell him, you cooked, let me clean up the kitchen, load the dishwasher for you while you relax. So I was in the kitchen. This was, an apartment. So he was in the living room area. He was watching TV and everything. And I just decided, you know what, let's have that conversation. And I just asked him, I was like, hey, marriage, what are your thoughts? And he doesn't even really look up from the TV to address me. He's just like, yeah, sure, let's do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? Let's do that. He actually looks up at me this time and he says, if you want to get married, then we can do that. Let me know what size ring you wear, what you want to wear, how you want your proposal to be and all that, and I'll get it settled. I'll get it taken care of. So I am in shock. And I just look at him and I say, are you serious right now? And at that point, he looks at me like I am the dumbest person on earth. And he says, Keshia, yes. He says, let's just be real about this. You want to get married. I think marriage is important too. My family likes you. I think you're great. And honestly, you work all the time. I work all the time. It's not like we have to spend a lot of time together anyways. And it was at that moment that I realized that relationship was not for me. And in the past, when I've told this story, I've talked about the fact that going into this relationship, I didn't think I wanted a lot of romance, and that conversation helped me realize that I did want more of that. I didn't just want to be with someone because it made sense, right? Because it seemed fiscally responsible, we had similar values, all of that. I wanted my future marriage to be more than just a business relationship, more than just some cold partnership. But I also realized later on, as I started to dive into my deep healing work, that the other issue with this relationship was that I was with someone who was emotionally unavailable. And also that I was with someone who was emotionally unavailable because I myself was emotionally unavailable. So that is what I want to talk with you about. Some signs that a person is emotionally unavailable. So welcome to Confidently Cherished. My name is Keshia Rice. I am a dating coach and hypnotherapist. I help ambitious women of faith find their dream partners without losing their values, their identity, or their sanity. And again, let's talk about some signs that you are with a person who is emotionally unavailable. So the first sign is they have a hard time with intimacy. And I'm not talking about just physical, sexual intimacy, although that's part of it too. Because here's the thing. One of the things that I studied in college was religion, and I also grew up Christian. And I've always said that the Bible and, other religious texts are at their hearts guides for practical living. And this is one of the reasons why I believe all major religions advocate against having sex before marriage. Because particularly for women, when we are physically intimate with someone, we release a hormone called oxytocin. It's called the cuddle hormone. It is a huge bonding hormone. In fact, in addition to being released during sex, this is the hormone that women release when they breastfeed their children. Again, it's called the cuddle hormone. It's the hormone that is released when we just cuddle, have any type of physicality with someone. And having that hormone be released into your brain when you're with someone who is not the person you're meant to be with, when there's someone better for you out there, it just causes so much damage. It is hard to be bonded to someone who is not right for you and to try to leave that relationship. So oftentimes, this idea of remaining celibate until marriage is about a protection. It is about allowing your heart, your mind, your body to be protected long enough for you to really get to know this person and make sure you are truly compatible, instead of you being just obsessed with the feeling that you get after sex, right? It is about making sure that not just your heart and your body are in the right place for this relationship, but that your mind is too, and that your discernment is on point. Because anyone can get caught up in that physical intimacy haze. In order for a relationship to truly work and be healthy, you need so much more than that. So when someone is emotionally unavailable, they have a hard time with physical intimacy in the relationship, and or emotional intimacy within the relationship. And this makes it difficult to have a healthy relationship with them because you're in a situation where you may be bonded to that person physically, emotionally, both, but that person does not have the same attraction as you do, the same bond that you do, which means that there's now a power imbalance in the relationship. It means that you are setting yourself up for heartbreak. And one of the best things that we can do for ourselves is to step into the relationship first with some logic, try to remain in our head as long as possible. And then after the person that we're with has proven that they can handle our hearts, then we allow that deeper attachment to form. But you'll notice with a person who is emotionally unavailable that no matter what you do to try to get close to them, try to bond with them, they seem to have a major struggle with accepting that closeness, allowing it to happen. Even if there is a lot of physical intimacy in the relationship. And I want to emphasize that because if someone is emotionally unavailable, you definitely won't get the emotional intimacy, right? But you may think you have the physical intimacy. This is where women talk about being quote unquote stigmatized because they think that the sex is so good, and it's not that the sex is so good. It's that the only time you bond with this person is when your clothes are off. Is that the only time this person seems to give you a piece of their soul is when you're willing to give up some of your body in exchange. And even in those moments when it seems like the two of you are intimate, you're not. You're intimate. He is not. He is just having sex. You know, when I was younger, I used to hear people say there was a difference between having sex and making love. And I didn't understand it until I got older, that there's truly a difference between the physical mechanics of a sexual relationship and the actual bond and closeness that can come when physical intimacy is part of a loving, long-term, committed relationship that also includes emotional intimacy as well. So that's your first sign. They have a hard time with physical and emotional intimacy. The second sign kind of falls or comes from that. A person who is emotionally unavailable also has a hard time with close relationships, both getting into these close relationships and staying in a close relationship. And not just romantic. Although, if you're thinking about committing to someone, you should definitely ask. You should ask if they've ever been in a serious romantic relationship before. How long have their most serious relationships lasted? But also just with friendships, you will find that this person has very few friendships in general, and that they may have no close friendships. And if you ask them about it, they may say that they've never really had a close friendship, or that they've had them in the past, but like they never last. That is a red flag. I say all the time that all relationships are related. And this is definitely one of those cases. If a person can't maintain close friendships, they're not going to be able to maintain close romantic relationships either. That brings us to point 3, a person who is emotionally unavailable. The relationships that they do have seem distant. I can definitely think of people in my past both friends and romantic partners for who this was the case. I would talk to them and they would tell me how much they loved someone who was supposedly close to them. So, raised by a single mother and they loved that mom so much. Or had the same friend since childhood and they loved that person so much. And you would hear all these great things about this person, but then when you got the chance to actually meet them, you would see how your partner or your friend interacted with this person. And you would see that although, yeah, they were happy to have them around, it was someone that they trusted, all of that, that they still didn't seem to have a lot of actual closeness to this person. I remember being with a guy who would always talk about how his mom was everything and how he was so close to his mom. But I remember at one point, I met his mom and I gave her a hug. And after I did that, he gave her a hug. And you would have thought he had come home and said he won the Nobel Peace Prize or that he had won the lottery or something, because she was so happy and so shocked. Because as it turns out, he kept talking about how close he was to his mom. But I found out that his mom, there were so many things about his life that I knew that his mom didn't. And I found out that, again, they had no physical closeness. He never hugged her or anything like that. So I believe we're on number 4. Another sign that a person is emotionally unavailable is they have a hard time talking about their feelings. And, back to my point about being with someone who's emotionally unavailable or attracting people who are unemotionally available, being because there's a part of you that is emotionally unavailable yourself. I see this one in particular so often with my clients. I have so many clients who, when we first start working together, it kind of takes a while to develop that rapport with them. Kind of takes a while to develop the relationship and get to a place where they can trust me so that we can actually do the work that needs to be done to create these healthy relationships. And it's because they have a hard time opening up about their feelings. And it's at a point where when you try to communicate with them, they have walls up, right? And I always tell my clients that we want to get to a place where we don't put walls up. We have fences up. Because boundaries are necessary. And that's what a fence is. It's a boundary. A fence allows you to have some boundaries up, create a requirement to allow someone into your space. Because, you can lock a fence so that people can't get into your yard. But at the same time, the difference between a fence and a wall is that you can't see through a wall. Whereas when you have a fence, you have those little openings so that you can see the other person can see a little bit of you, and you can really use that little bit of vulnerability to discern if you want to get closer to this person and if you want to be close enough to eventually open the fence and let them in. But again, in order for that to be the case, you have to start with having a fence up and not a brick wall. And that brings me to the last point, is that a person who is emotionally unavailable will do everything in their power to avoid having a deep conversation. So when a person is emotionally unavailable, having these conversations about feelings, having these conversations about things that are bothering you in the relationship, again, is like having a brick wall up. they do everything they can to avoid it, whether that is changing the subject, whether that is going with some cliche phrases that don't really go deep into how they really feel. Or you'll see this with some people, they will constantly just give the silent treatment. Every time something doesn't go their way and there's an argument that requires now, oh, you must actually open up and be vulnerable, rather than be vulnerable, they disappear. Rather than be vulnerable, they just shut down and won't talk. Again, it's having a brick wall up. And in order for a relationship to work, the both of you have to have fences. The both of you have to be willing to let each other into each other's yards. Not necessarily on the first date, first couple of conversations, but you have to start with that willingness of, hey, if this person shows he's trustworthy, then yes, I would be able to do that. But without that premise, all you have are two walls facing each other and no connection, because there's no way the two people on the other side can push through the walls. So those are the signs that a person is emotionally unavailable. Let me know if you think I left anything out, or let me know if you've ever found yourself in a relationship where you were with someone who was emotionally unavailable and you tried to push through, but it didn't work. Or maybe you were the person who was emotionally unavailable. I would love to hear your thoughts. I am on social media at Keshia Rice, KESHIA and I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So yeah, share your thoughts with me about this episode, and I will talk to you soon. Love you. Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that like by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeshiaRice.com/links. That's KESHIARICE.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So see you then.